violent, abusive upbringing, I learned very quickly to actually not trust people based on how they present. But they might not be that. They might just happen to be charming and warm. And I give them a chance. I rejected them before they rejected me. I formed the idea that actually that I wasn't likable and that I wasn't fun, and that the only people that did like me, because they told me, was my dad and that ex. They kind of had a way of saying, you're just for me. I wasn't allowed to have friends, so the best friend that I was allowed was a white middle-class English girl. I'm the whitest mixed race person you'll ever know. Definitely didn't believe in. There was no red table talk back then. There was no Hollywood A-listers, right, who were saying therapy's good, even though clearly Will Smith didn't do enough therapy. The only way I know how to heal that level of depression is to give more, because I was sort of stuck in a little bit of a wounded identity. And in terms of your wounds, we just have to keep healing that stuff. Being kind with yourself, kind and compassionate, but brave as well.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another incredible episode of Husband in Life. I'm Standishchild.
I'm Kelechi. And together we are the Chapfikas.
Hello. Hey. What's going on?
Thank you for joining us once again.
Absolutely.
We have a very, very special episode today.
Absolutely. Yes, we do.
We're really, really excited.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we excited, babes?
Oh, wait. Just curious. You guys say you love our podcast. They say that all the time when they see us. Okay. How many of you have you shared it with your friends? How many of you shared it with your family? I just want to know that fact, before we get into it. So we got out of the way. So now, if I'm serious, we have an incredible guest with us today. Our very first one. Very first one. So we have an incredible guest. So, Kelechi, let them know who we have, please.
Wow, this introduction is going to be very special.
Okay.
Because she's our first guest on the podcast. Brand new to 2024. Here we go.
Okay.
So I want to introduce you to an amazing creative coach who is neurodiverse, and she is here to discuss friendships, adult friendships, and we're going to be looking at the importance of adult friendships and how it can manifest into loneliness at some times. She is what she calls herself an introverted extrovert, my kind of lady.
Like you?
My kind of lady. And she's currently writing her first solo show about healing from loss and trauma and loneliness. So we would like to invite Leila to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm so good. That was an amazing introduction. You two, you literally... you're amazing. So good. I love it.
We're really happy to have you here. You're our first guest.
Here.
Thank you for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for being willing to open the doors to you guys.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
I'm
a bit nervous. I'm actually a bit. I'm gonna name that for anyone that thinks you jump on these things fearless. And because part of my coaching is about being visible on camera, it's okay to be afraid and show up anyway, right? But you two are amazing.
We say you're gonna punch fear in the face and do it anyway.
Yeah. Punch, cuddle, just put it in its rightful place. Yeah, I love that.
Amazing.
That's brilliant.
So we're just gonna have a conversation, just like, as we get older, how do you find the difference? How difficult is it making friends now as we're older than when we were younger, when we were just free in the park? You see a kid, you play together, and that's it. There's no conversation. They don't even know their names. They just play, How have you found that as we get older? How's that to make friends,
It's such a good question. There is this moment in our life when we're allowed to have friends and enjoy them more. Although I had a very strict dad, and he kept banning me from mixing with people, actually. So
Oh,
I had a bit of a strange, unusual upbringing, which
let's
I
have it.
carried
Yeah.
with me. It was like, you don't go to school to make friends, which I
Oh,
understand his thinking.
yeah.
But then if you didn't like my friend, I don't know if you have any in your like background strict fathers, you know of strict fathers, but if you didn't like someone, if you didn't like their family, that was it. I had to cut them off, you know? So
Wow.
actually, I carried with me from my childhood onwards difficulties with making friends. And it's taken me all the way to age 50 to figure out that I had the seed was all the way back in childhood, where I learned from my dad not to trust people and to stand on your own 2 feet and to be, you know, independent thinking, which I am. He gifted me with that.
Yeah.
You know, he was from Trinidad. He stowed away on a boat from Trinidad at 16. He left his crazy family for over here. So of course he had
Wow.
that. He had a real sort of
Yeah.
a bit of a rebel nature to him. But actually, of course, we need people and we need community and we need friends. So I would agree that actually, as we get older, it can become harder. And I'm part of the population. We're at like 10% now, which is worrying in a way, but it's the truth. We're growing of single women. I'm not married. I don't have kids. So all of those normal ways of like normal moments of connection are at risk of being lost altogether.
Yeah.
And then of course you do find it depends on what community you live in as to whether or not like I live in Fulham, love Fulham, and I might lose if there's some people from Fulham or Chelsea. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I do think there's a certain kind of community or people that are just not so available to even warmth and having a little bit of chat. And whereas if I go to Ladbroke Grove, which was the area that I went to school in, you'll go anywhere and you can kind of make friends more easily. But yeah, it does get it. I mean, I'm digressing there, but there's even sometimes a bit of cultural classism stuff that goes on.
Right.
And that maybe that's a bit controversial to say, but
Yes.
it is, isn't it? But we won't go there. Please edit that. My ADHD means, for me, it shows up as I have multiple streams of thoughts that happen in quick succession. So you'll notice that I jump from platform A or platform 1 to platform 10 to 8 back to 1. So if you need to bring me back to 1, or if you can bear with, I rein me in. I normally get to the main point, which is, yes, I think for me, I had to take really seriously after my mum passed away and just being very isolated because of not having a husband and kids and all of my friends being in the bubble of their own world and their own challenges. And we have a pandemic and all of that. And I really had to think, my God, I'm 50. I'm this lonely. It feels like I'm experiencing the loneliness of what you would expect a 70 or 80-year-old to go through. I've been made redundant, so I didn't have a connection of work either.
Right.
But it had been growing over the years, so I got to such a place of despair, really, that I began to think, why am I here? Who needs me? No one will notice if it's really bad. My thoughts went to a very dark place. And so I really had to look at, this is my life. This is the life I'm in it. Someone chose it. It's probably me, rightly or wrongly. Sometimes we make choices and we don't always know if they're the right one or not. It's the right choice to have made, and so I had to really take seriously. And I was looking at hobbies, and I started playing the samba drums, and then it wasn't. And then for whatever reason, a silly reason, but I kind of dropped out of that for a bit, and then I tried something else, and eventually I was like, well, I'm writing this solo show. I have this idea about if I serve more, if I show up and I contribute more, that will actually heal some of the loneliness and depression, and I'll feel like I have purpose.
That's huge, yeah.
It's huge. We all need to be needed. So I set up this writing group in Ladbroke Grove, and it's just a handful of women, but we're all really interesting, and they all have stories to tell. And it's not like we're Shakespeare or anyone, but we've got stories to tell because we've lived a bit of life,
In some of those groups, like, what are the challenges that you think like you kind of face when you're dealing with friendship? Do you know when you're trying to?
Yeah, sure. So So the friends that I did have, I think it was really difficult if you're going through a really hard time and you know your friends are busy. Even telling them you're going through a hard time. The truth is, people are limited in their time. And sorry, my phone is on silent, but there we go. I'm friends that have a limited amount of time and energy for someone else who's going through a problematic period of their life. Or if you have any friends or family who are depressive prone, then throughout a whole lifetime we're going to be a little bit challenging. We're a little bit more challenging. We're more intense. We're harder work. You have to kind of be present for us. You can't just fob us off in the same way. So I was kind of faced with the reality of knowing that being, I'm enough of a grown-up to know I can't expect people to suddenly be available for me because I need them and my mum died and I was depressed. So there's a level of making peace with that, and then thinking, and of course I would tell them how I felt, but it didn't really change anything, because people have their priorities, and you can't, nobody would ever I would never want to force my presence on anyone, whether I'm in a good state or a bad state. You have to be respectful of people's lives. So it's a difficult one, that actually. And I do think as a society we so easily chuck people out if they don't fit conveniently into our life. I do think that's a theme that I'm interested in. I'm like, we need to find ways to call that friend, call that person that you actually love and that you know does good in the world, but you just keep not paying attention to. I'd say, like, remember them, because they may need you at some point, and vice versa. You might need them at some point. But yeah, it's a difficult one.
It's a difficult one to navigate.
And you have to. So for me, with the depression or grief or whatever, I had to be very mindful of ticking lots of boxes, right? Like, do I need to go to the doctor? Do I need therapy? Do I need a coach? Do I need a hobby? And just to take it as seriously as possible, because we don't talk about loneliness, and yet it's on the rise, and it's getting the age of loneliness is, I'm 50, but I think it starts even earlier, because everybody's got this idea of living their life on screen, through a screen. And young people are learning to, like, even when they're hanging around each other, right? They're on their phones. They're just, it affects things. So anyway, back to you. Sorry.
That's to a good segment, because we were going to talk to you about social media and how it impacts, loneliness, how it impacts the generations that are, coming from behind us, and how do you think it's changed? That, because you said you're 50, so maybe in your 20s, do you think that things were much easier back then? Was it easier to make friends in your 20s when you're kind of carefree and young and full of energy?
I think it probably is, but everyone's different. So I have I have a bit of a complicated background, as in I had bouts of depression and stuff. So like I said at the beginning of the chat, actually I struggled, and I had my childhood sweetheart I was with from 16 to 26. He was really gregarious, really extroverted, became quite a well-established actor, and I hid behind him. That's the truth.
Right.
I hid behind him, I was fully in my introverted phase.
Yes.
And but I do think generally, so there'll be some of your audience who are carrying some of that stuff, that who may be carrying some trauma stuff from their childhood that might be affecting their capacity to make friends. But of course I do think, when you're younger, it is so much easier in comparison, and it certainly would have been for me. The absence of phones. I just don't think we realize how I love technology. It's brilliant, but I do think it's got some quite. It's got a dangerous side to it, actually.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So you've got to kind of know what you're doing.
Do you find that with your kids? Are you finding that you're having to prize the phone away from them, or do you not talk about your children on the channel, possibly?
No, we do. We are very mindful of what they're consuming, because we've got teenagers, so we have to really be careful with what he's consuming. But he has blocks on his iPad, There's certain things he can't look at. He doesn't have social media. He does have a YouTube, so he can look at videos, and he loves watching the gamers. I don't understand it, but he likes to sit there and watch people play games. So that's his thing, really. But he's very much into his sports, so he doesn't obsess over. He doesn't have a phone. Doesn't obsess over having a phone.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Hold on, can we just? That is amazing. He doesn't have a phone. How did you do that? Because that's what I see with my friends.
He's broken a few phones. So now we said no.
So now I'm like, I'm not getting any more phones. I'm done with having to give you phone after phone after phone. So he's trying to think of he's thinking outside of the box now. He's trying to think of a way of how he can go and buy his own phone, because he realises that Mum's not going to get him a phone.
Yeah, you're activating his sense of responsibility and resourcefulness, which is brilliant.
He's going to get creative with it, and we're going to see how it goes for him.
I love that.
It enables him to go out and actually speak to people and then engage and interact, and conversate with people, which is what we were talking about, like you're saying with friends now, how everything is so online, how difficult that is. And I was going to just ask, do you think now it's easier to rely on acquaintances than those friends that are like long life friends? Because sometimes you have access to them at work, and sometimes your friend is in Leeds and you see them once a year, but they're your diehard friend, but they're just not there. Do you think acquaintances seem to have a bit more influence because you see them every day or every 2 days? I
don't know. I think there is nothing like, your description of die-hard friends. I mean, that's just invaluable. That person that you see once a year for 20, 30, that's amazing.
And it's the same. It's the same.
It's the same. And if you guys become multimillionaires, you'll still be hanging out with them. And if anything doesn't work out, you'll still see them once a year. So I think those friendships are priceless. But yeah, in terms of if you're looking at loneliness and connection, the people that we hang out with more often, we see more often, it does matter. And acquaintances at work, it's kind of, I don't know if I'd call that friendship, but I mean, you can if you have friends at work, that's ideal. You're in a good place at work, aren't you? If you make friends with your colleagues and you know that they can cheer you up on a bad day, that is gold dust, actually.
It is.
But if you work somewhere, I'm a really creative person, but I've worked in very corporate environments before I decided to go for, just in the last month really, to go for coaching and never set foot in a corporate environment again. We'll see what happens, right? But in that setting, I worked in the financial sector, and they're interesting, lovely people, absolutely, but they are, in comparison to the way my mind works, I'm like a freak of nature, and they would both like that and be slightly like, you need to rein it in, which I did, because we have to do that as adults. But therefore, even my workplace when I was in work was actually not very fulfilling. So it does matter. It also matters where you work.
Absolutely.
Are you a cultural fit? Have you got the same interests, or just spirit? It's the spirit thing, really.
Yeah, the spirit thing. Energy as well. It's an energy thing.
Yeah. I just realised I said spirit. Some of your audience are going to think, what does that mean? I'm like, okay. Sorry. You know what I mean.
No, I think it's really important to incorporate where you work as well, because you can find where you work might be somewhere that maybe you're dimming your light a bit too much, and then you're not actually being your authentic self, which can then cause more depression, more feeling of loneliness, and for you to actually retract from those that are putting a hand out to say, oh, do you want to come out for a drink? Or do you want to, we're going here as a group, do you want to come with us? And you're thinking, no, thank you, because I can't be myself around you. So, you're going to think I'm weird, or you're going to think that, I'm crazy. So therefore, I'm not going to go. And then you start getting these thoughts where you think nobody likes you, whereas they've put their hand out a few times and said, come on, let's let's go, and you've said no. So yeah, have you ever had that kind of experience where you felt that way, where you've had to dim your light?
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that I've done in the office, I was reception, so I answered, answer phone, so I slap on a smile, warm, welcoming, all of those things. But then the other things that I love, which has always been personal development and spirituality and creativity, kind of obviously it becomes a much smaller thing. I didn't have the energy to really give to it in the same way, but yeah, I mean, it's a bizarre thing. I would be brought in for my energy and my capacity to make anybody feel comfortable within seconds, and because I'm in that context, I'm a good conversationalist. You guys are interviewing me, so I'm talking a lot, but if the roles were reversed, I would be getting you talking a lot. I would be finding out about you. My focus would be on you guys even more so.
Yes.
But at the same time, I did have to, and I think a lot of people do. I think that's really, really common. And it's a bit of a balance between, well, I need to pay the bills and where am I going to earn more money? And sometimes a place where you'll earn more money, maybe the place where you feel least appreciated and least at home. But actually, in that context, that there wasn't really any socializing. If there was, I would go out. But it is a really, the question of being liked. Actually, again, I go back to all the way back to my childhood. I think stuff that went on with my dad and the crazy dad that I had, who I adore and loved, but he was kind of had a lot of trauma himself. Between him and then the gregarious ex, I think really right back to being a teenager, which is a million years ago, I formed the idea that actually that I wasn't likable and that I wasn't fun, and that the only people that did like me, because they told me, was my dad and that ex, and they both said they kind of had a way of saying, you're just for me, you're a bit much for anyone else, but you're just for me. And so this is why coaching and therapy or journaling or whatever practices you have are so important. And for me, the work never stops. So I did carry around a sense of I probably on some level did reject people in some way who I rejected them before they rejected me. But that thinking's changed now, really, in the last 6 months. It's completely changed, and that's why I'm even here today. Is I've suddenly gone, who can I collaborate with? Who can I talk to? Who can I connect with? And I wouldn't have done that before. I would have had this running, very powerful sense of I'm not for anyone else. I'm brilliant, but no one else likes me. But what a way to... Can you imagine what a difference that makes to your world? If you look at everyone and you think... If you think straight away they're going to reject you, then of course it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And in that way, then you're kind of saying, I'm going to protect myself from the rejection by rejecting first.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's my part in creating loneliness. That's my part, and that's me taking on that trauma and not knowing how at that point to unravel it. So such a heavy word. I should stop saying trauma. It's a horrid word.
No, it's good. So you talk about like your ex and your dad and how they made you feel. How have you been able to kind of identify those factors in people that come and trying to befriend you? Have you have you worked on that? Have you consciously made decisions to go, I think there's a red flag there from my part? Yes. How have you been able to maneuver through that as you...
I think that's such a brilliant question, and oh my goodness, that's such a brilliant question. All right, give me a moment, because that's a big juicy question. So I would say my new challenge is having my eyes open and being open to seeing that there are lots of different types of people out there, both from men and women, and to see the good in the world. Actually, because I had quite a challenging, violent, abusive upbringing, I think it's actually, I learned very quickly to actually not trust people based on how they present. My father was very gregarious. He was a bit of a community leader. He was considered to make a difference in our community, and yet it was completely different behind closed doors. So I now, from a very young age, and it is a real strength, but also I have to be careful of it because I can project that onto people as well. But I do. There are red flags. You can see if if you do any research on narcissists, there's so much now on YouTube that you can get, that helps teach people about how to spot those signs, and that would be a whole other. And I don't say I'm an expert on that, but I am very good at reading. I'm not allowed to swear on this channel, so let me find out. I'm good at reading when people are faking it. Oh, do you?
This is grown folk, women.
Out the room.
It's husband and life.
Well, okay, so I can spot a bullshit artist. I can sniff them from a mile off. But because of my background, I also have to be careful. Somebody could be charming, warm, gregarious, loving, and not have those narcissistic qualities. So what I do now is I'm like, I think I can't help it. I'm like, that, I see. And then I have to go, but they might not be that. They might just happen to be charming and warm. And I give them a chance. I just, it's like the lion. I don't go all the way into the lion's mouth. I just see, like, I think it might be a lion, but I'm just going to stay here and see, because I have to be open to being wrong as well, because you can't, we don't always, sometimes you can project the past on the present and it's completely inaccurate. So I have to be careful about that as well.
Life throws us challenges all the time, isn't it? These things we have to go through, and you need to find a way to try and find a way to win, I always say.
Find a way to win. I love that.
Because
great.
sometimes we're not dealt the best hands. Like we spoke about earlier when we spoken about COVID, like the loneliness that brought on people that are so used to being interactive, being outside, body to body contact, just going out, socializing, interactions, all those connections that we made. How did you cope during that time?
Well, I would say on the one hand I coped badly, but actually I remember the beginning of COVID. I felt immense relief. I felt like there was no pressure to be successful in my business ideas or my creativity. Suddenly there was this quiet, and I was like, as the introvert in me, I don't know if you relate to this, but the introvert in me, I love time and space to hear my own thoughts. I felt it's a bit like when you wake up really early and everyone's asleep, and the atmosphere is different, right? And it's like it felt a little bit like that, right? It felt like that at first, and I was great for a long while. I was good, and I think really for me, because I'd managed loneliness for a long time, it was really for me only an issue when my mum passed, and suddenly it was like both my parents are gone. Oh my God. And there was this, suddenly it made me feel that ache of loneliness and needing human contact, or even just a hug from someone, I still tear up about that a little bit. But that was definitely hard. And it was just and lots of people freaked out in different ways, didn't they, during COVID, and they coped in different ways. But I did things like I went to the park. I started going to acting classes on Zoom. That was amazing.
Wow.
I started writing again. I did things like that, but I was still suffering a lot. But those were my little, a bit like climbing a mountain. That was the bottom of the mountain. I was like, I have to do something. I have to do something, So it was a challenging time.
Yeah, it's
very, very challenging time. I think you're really brave for acknowledging that it was a challenging time. A lot of people kind of brush things under the carpet and say, it was fine. It was absolute. And I was the same as you at the beginning when it was announced that we were going to, I was like, yes, thank you. There is a God, because I just wanted to be at home. I was like, I'm going to be at home. I'm just going to rest and it's going to be fantastic. And the quiet, when I used to walk down the street and it was so silent. It was beautiful. Literally. And I was the same for a while. I really enjoyed it, and then things changed very, very drastically, and then it became the nightmare that it was. So I can totally, understand the clawing yourself. I felt like I was clawing myself out of a deep, dark cave and literally scraping my way out of it. So I can definitely relate to that.
Well, it's interesting that when you meet people who are in denial, I think they're in denial, and they say, and people who had to go into work as well had a different experience from those of us who were told to go home. I mean, really different. They don't understand why people that are returning to work are not operating at the same speed. I think people are just not capable of dealing with that level of stress that they used to be able to deal with. And the people who stayed in work just don't get it. They're like, and you're like, no, you don't understand. My nervous system reset. I got used to working at a better rhythm, and then when you go back into the workplace, if they don't understand. I think not just they don't understand. I think as a culture we haven't quite come to terms with what we all went through. We haven't really had anything like that before,
Yeah.
It's because people have been so conditioned to do what they're told. Oh, we need to do this now. This is what needs to happen. You need to get a good job. You need to get a family. You need to have kids. You need to have this. You need to have a career. You need to go to university. You need to do this. And if you don't do this, you're not quite such a thing, which is insane because we're all individuals and we're all unique. We have our own things, which leads me to asking, is there anything wrong with not having friends?
But it's so important. I love you. I love your mind. I love that. That's the way my mind works. I'm sorry, my microphone's doing weird things.
No, it's fine.
I love it because that's such a good question. I think honestly, I think you should always ask questions from both points of view, because sometimes there's a blessing in spending time alone and standing on your own 2 feet and getting to know your emotions and even dropping into, I believe sometimes the value of like processing emotions, that if you have too many people around you crowding you, you won't hear yourself. You won't sense yourself, you won't notice your emotions. So time alone, yes, but no friends at all. Okay, I haven't got the I still think it's an important question because I could be wrong. I'm not I'm not an expert. I'm just from my corner of the universe. I would say in terms of health and well-being, we need meaningful connections. And some of those connections might be light and frothy. I have friends now who are light and frothy and we don't see eye to eye on many things, but my God, do they cheer me up. If I'm having a bad day, I hang out with that tough, robust, optimistic person who does not relate to sadness, depression, trauma, any of that. She doesn't know what I'm on about, but she makes me feel great. I see the value. She's just like, she's a walking party. So that's who I go to. Right, we all need that, and that's brilliant. You don't want people who are exactly the same as you all of the time. So there's different kinds of friendship. But I don't know, do we need friends? I actually think research, that I've got a bias now, right, because I've been doing my research into it. So I have a natural bias. I will have been looking at things from this point of view and not from the point of view that you posed that very brilliant question. But the research that I found was relationships are better when men and women have good friends, because you'll get a different perspective. If you've got good friends, I'm not talking about bad friends, and that's another topic, right? But good friends will keep you in check and give you another perspective and help you if you... Did I get that wrong? Was I a bit harsh? Should I have said sorry? Especially as you're, younger in a relationship, if you have... Anyway, so... And I think there's lots of links between men and depression as well, because if their partner... And then I'm going to contradict myself in a minute, and you guys are probably going to contradict me, because that's life. But if women often have more female friends that they bounce ideas around with and they process their ideas with. Even if you chat to a friend and you think, no, I don't want their advice. No, that's not true for me. You still kind of got into this habit of sharing things, and it helps you process your thoughts and feelings. But apparently men tend not to have friendships like that. Now, not your experience. I love that. Oh, they don't. They don't.
No.
They don't. And one of the reasons, so they get a lot. Therefore, that's why, men love the company of women. It's often because we add that flavor of, we help you connect in with your heart and your emotions in a way that you might not get from your male friends. But apparently there is evidence to say, men need friends too. It actually relieves some of the pressure in the relationship, because if you're only ever looking to your partner to help you process everything, that's a lot of pressure to put on them. And there's lots of links between loneliness and chronic disease. They talk about everything from Alzheimer's, dementia, heart attack. Our chances of dying are something, I can't remember the percentage, I'd have to look it up, but it's like 50% higher if you're lonely. So it has an effect upon your immune system, and of course, if you feel lonely and you don't feel useful, you're not going to look after yourself as well. You're not going to eat so well. You're not going to get to the gym. If you think nobody cares, so I think yes, we do need friends, but quality of friendship, that really matters. I don't believe in just any friends. I think that can be really toxic and draining. So what do you think? Tell me more.
I think the dimensions of like the loneliness and death I've seen in real time. When I was younger, I was a carer. I used to be an in-house carer. I used to go into people's homes and just make sure they ate something and they were comfortable, make them tea, sit down, have a chat with them. Sometimes used to help them get breast. And that's where I started with my healthcare journey. And there was a client that I had who, his wife had just died, and it was my first day seeing him, and his wife had just died like the day before, and he was absolutely distraught. And his family, his kids had asked just for me to go in and just check on him, just make sure he was eating, make sure he was looking after himself. So she had died on the Friday. He was sad. I went in literally every day that week just to check on him. He cried a lot. I would sit and talk with him about his wife and, how long they'd been together for years and years and years. And so she had died on the Friday. By the Monday, he had passed away. So that means, the way I saw it is, he died of a broken heart, because he didn't have any ailments. He wasn't taking medication for anything. He was just completely beside himself without his wonderful wife that he'd been married to for over 50 years. And I just felt so sad for his children. I know they're adults, but they were still, that was still their dad. So they'd lost their mum, and then within a week they'd lost their dad. And and I just saw it in real time, how you can be just so distraught, so lonely. He just kept saying, I'm so lonely without her. And then, to pass away on the Monday, I was really sad, because he was such a lovely man, so sweet, and he had amazing stories. I love hearing the stories about how they met and all the things they've done together, and children, grandchildren, all of that stuff. And it just, when I heard that he passed away, I just thought, my goodness, at least he's with his wife now, because he really missed her, really missed her. But at the same time, I did think about his children, his grandchildren, great grandchildren, and how it would impact them as well. Losing both grandparents so suddenly at the same kind of time. So I think loneliness it can really be detrimental, definitely for your nervous system, for your mental health. And it's not just a case of being lonely because you're by yourself. There are times when you can feel lonely when you're in a room full of people. But at some point you get those thoughts where you feel like nobody sees you, you feel invisible. And you start having those negative thoughts come in where you're just like, I don't want to be here, I think I should go. And you kind of tell yourself that it's time to leave, because I feel like I need to be at home by myself, because clearly no one can see me. So there's those aspects as well of loneliness.
I wonder if that is something that internal narrative, I wonder if that is something that is specific to introverts and people that are just more sensitively wired, because I relate to that. You know, if I go to a large group, if I've got one person or two people or just one person that I really connect with, and I feel that, then it can make everything. But if you go there and it's just that general chit chat, I feel immense loneliness as well. So I do wonder if that is an introvert thing, because I don't think everyone feels that way. You know,
Do you
there are
feel
some
that way,
people that
Liz?
just don't
Have
feel that way.
Have you felt that? Because he's an extrovert, so
ask the
you know.
extrovert.
Yeah, ask the extrovert.
I was about, it's different because it depends the setting. Because I go out to networking events by myself.
Yeah.
Literally to go meet people and I start chatting to people. But then there's certain aspects where you see it and you go, oof, what's going on over there? What's that?
Hey.
You know, there's little bits of here. So it's a mix.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not as cut and dry as you lot see it, as present it.
No, sure. Everyone has everyone wants to feel understood, introvert or extrovert. Everyone wants to feel seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because I just have that kind of personality. I'm just a bit out there, as she says, that I'm just out there, just talking. But that's another thing, which we're talking about the things our parents give us, the good and bad things, because I got this from my dad. When we used to go out, my dad used to speak to everybody. The lady in Sainsbury, anybody, we'll be there chatting for 20 minutes. I'm like, let's just go. What are we doing? What is this? Let's just go. So now I do the same shit when I'm with my son. So when we go out, he's like, can we go?
That is so nice. That is so nice. But is it nice for you, Kelechi? Is it like being next to someone famous and you're like, can you just leave my husband alone? Like,
it's nice to watch. I enjoy watching him in action. It's hilarious. I'm like, oh, here he goes.
Good.
He's off again.
That's wonderful. That's good. I love the yin and yang.
Yeah, I like the fact that he is definitely the extrovert. He's out there and he'll talk to people. Me, I need to warm up to you. I can't just go in there. I'm trying a bit more now. I think it's time to step out of the comfort zone and talk to people a bit more and get to know people. Because I like talking to people and hearing their stories, but I think it's that initial going into a room and starting to talk to a stranger is a bit like and I think it does definitely stems from the childhood. And for me, I grew up in quite a toxic home, so I was very much told to just stay quiet. We don't want to hear you. I would leave the house a lot because I didn't want to be in the environment. And nobody would notice. Nobody would notice that I was gone. I was as young as 7, just gone for the whole day. Nobody would notice. So I've always felt like very invisible, very, just keep quiet, don't rock the boat. I've definitely carried that throughout my whole life. And it's only in the last few years, I think, that it's now that I'm trying to reprogram that and change that. That's not my narrative. I'm not just an introvert. I'm other things. I am a creative person. I do love to public speak. I don't have a problem with doing it. I have things to say. I have stories to tell. So it's just one of those things where you have to keep kind of working on yourself so that you're not always that introvert that stays in it and becomes lonely and, friendless as we're talking about. So
love that, Kelechi. So you don't put yourself in a box. That's why I don't really like labels. That's why I even go introverted, extrovert. And even with the ADHD thing, and even referring to toxic families, I'm always it's really important that we honor those experiences, but sometimes we can also lock ourselves into I'm an introvert, or I'm someone who had a toxic family and therefore it means. So I think for a lot of introverted people and people who have had a toxic childhood where they felt invisible, unseen, neglected or abused, whatever version of that there is, I think that actually showing up for camera and for your business, where you have to connect in with an audience, it's healing work. It's beautiful, but it kind of is, isn't it? You think you're like, well, I want to get followers, I want to do this and that with my business, but actually it turns out you're also healing some of those those corners of yourself, you know, in the process of doing it.
It's because we created it with like the purpose of expressing like the things that we go through together and showing how we solve problems in real time, and then how people can actually implement some of those things we go through and those tips that we have, the hacks that they say, these kids.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
So now it's the next part I was going to ask was because you say your dad was from Trinidad. That's what you said? He was from Trinidad.
Yeah, I say I'm the whitest mixed race person you'll ever know. I also say.
No, we've got some people that can.
You passing, you know.
One of our friends had children of mixed race, and you wouldn't know.
Blonde-eyed, not blonde-haired. Yeah, blonde-eyed. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It's amazing, though. I love like how we can all just be so meshed together and just have such different DNA, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Talking about culture, how do you think that plays? How role culture plays? How you were raised, where you're from, where you were told you belong. How does that impact the way you make friends?
Oh my goodness, he's good at this. These are so good. They're so good. I'm not bullshitting either. They're really good questions. Are you psychic? I mean, really, really good. Okay, so it's not going to be a short answer. Okay, you know, it's going to be a long one. Right. So it was So I'm 50. So I was born in 1973, and my dad came over here at 16, and you know, you'll know from stories from your parents' generation and what have you, that it was even more overtly racist when he came over here.
Absolutely.
You know, it wasn't hidden and subtle. It was, you know, there. So my dad also came from a great deal of trauma. He was abandoned by his mum and lots of things went on there. I don't know all of the stories. I just have heard little stories.
Yeah.
So he ran away from his family and came here, and then he had the trauma of being a black man, a foreigner, or black brown, however you would see it. And he had that trauma, and they definitely didn't believe in. There was no red table talk back then. There was no Hollywood A-listers, right, who were saying therapy's good, even though clearly Will Smith didn't do enough therapy, or he wouldn't have punched Chris Rock. So it didn't entirely work. No offense, sorry, Will, but you never know. He might watch your channel because he might need some tips. Anyway. Okay. So there was no therapy back then, and I remember. I don't even know how I knew this, but I know that doctors routinely would write paranoia on their doctor's notes about my dad. And I remember, because my dad was such a weird combination of things. He was a community leader on the one hand, doing had this community groups. We were taught singing by the London Community Gospel Choir, only he banned them from talking about God or Jesus because my dad was an atheist, right? When I say he was unusual, right? So he brings them in and says, teach them harmony, how to sing beautifully. I love this. But you can't talk about God or Jesus. And they were like, okay, I'm a singing teacher. I can do that. So he brought them in. Then we also learned steel pan. So we had these community groups going on. And then we would have academics, like a Trinidadian academic at a university of blah, 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 of Warwick. Or like they were kind of occasionally coming in and out of my house. And then we would go to these council meetings to do with race and equality. There was something called the Race and Equality Commission back in the 80s and the 90s. So basically, I felt like my parents were really in this sort of a kind of activism and like having discussions about like race and gender and equality and all of that stuff. And I've forgotten what your question was. Culture. Right, okay. But at the same time, this was going on. My dad was very confused and very traumatized and didn't have the language for his experience and didn't know to ask for help and was too proud and was too wounded and proud and all of those things. And actually, he did and when I share this with some of my friends, they're like, oh, it's a good thing. And then if I speak to another set of friends, they're like, oh my God, that's completely bizarre. But either way, I have my own opinion. But my dad would tell me that I was black. And again, I have friends who say, well, that's because you are. And then I'm like, but it took me a lot of years to realize that I'm treated and that actually this is the color of my skin and my experience is going to be different. My perspective of the world. I was so aligned with my dad. I adored my dad when I was younger so much that his challenges were kind of my challenges. So I felt like I was. So it didn't feel entirely untrue. But the truth is, this is what I look like, and this is how I'm treated. And I'm mixed race. That's important for me to say I'm mixed race. But in terms of, so it's actually it's been, I suppose, messy, and it's part of the reason why I'm an introvert. Part of the reason I'm a creative is because I've always been on the outside of things, and a bit like you, Kelechi, when you have a family that are seen and liked by everybody, but behind closed doors, it's a complete he was meant to be pro women, but he wasn't pro women because he lived off my mum and he was violent and violent to us all. Right. So I felt that's where the first thing of loneliness comes from. Actually, is where you walk around and you feel like nobody knows or nobody cares. It's one or the other. When you're a kid, you're like, but you're adoring him. But who's asking those questions? So in terms of the cultural thing, it's been really kind of complicated. And part of my healing journey on that, in setting up my writers group, it's actually set up in Ladbroke Grove, which is near the school that I went to, Holland Park School, which is one of the most multiculturally diverse, or it was in my day, schools in London. And it was very normal to have a mix of race, culture, religion, class. You'd have middle class, trendy, affluent kids. Their parents would send them to the school because it was near Notting Hill Gate, and they liked the politics. They liked the idea of them being. They liked the idea of inclusive society. And then you had working class kids of every persuasion, from council estates and everything. Like, not that wherever we live, it doesn't really matter. But I felt at home in that setting around that much diversity. I felt really at home. But I wasn't allowed to have friends. So part of your cultural belonging is being allowed to actually be part of that culture. But my dad was like, this is your culture, it's home. And it was, we had
there
great
wasn't
food.
any friend?
I was allowed she went to Oxford. My best friend that I was allowed was a white middle-class English girl who was very good and ticked his, she's studious. She had no trauma in her background, and he wasn't afraid of anything happening with her. His thing of limiting me from having friends was not entirely bad. Everybody's parents at my school, they were a bit crazy. They were, a bit like Skins. I don't know if you've seen that show, Skins.
Yeah.
Where the parents are these bohemian doing crazy stuff, and everybody's parents were a bit like that growing up. So I understand. It was just ironic that he was such a bad dad, but he was stopping me from having friends, and that those friends were good friends and were not a reflection of their parents, actually. But nobody came into our home because we were hiding. We had to hide how it really was. Exactly. So friends weren't allowed round, and I wasn't allowed to stay over anymore. But anyway, so this writers group that I've set up now actually takes me back into the heart of the community that I was kind of touched by, but wasn't really allowed to integrate within. And my solo show that I'm writing is about reclaiming my right to be connected to a community and make friends. So that's the way I'm kind of doing it, is I'm kind of going back into that community as an adult, not as a child. And I don't know how to answer that question in a really clean, crisp way, but I think for me, it's complicated. I don't know if it was clean and crisp, but it was the truth. But
because you highlighted those factors were the things that were around, because he was trying to obviously stop you from experiencing the things he thought stopped him. So he was using the tools he had. He didn't have no iPhones then. He had to go to the phone shop, do a reverse call, press the thing in. So,
yeah.
There was
Well,
no
his
Wi-Fi.
way was just to stop. It wasn't to be like,
Just no.
just
You
stop.
can't.
You
Yeah.
can't. But also he didn't. But also the thing of an abusive narcissistic person is they will control everything.
Yes,
They have to
exactly.
control everything,
They must
and
control.
you can't completely control your children. Even that you
No.
can take away the phone for sure, but you know it's difficult. You know, I do recognise if I was a parent, I'd be like, how would I handle that? But it's so hypocritical, isn't it? I think the thing that's frustrating is like, how can you be that hard on them when you're doing that? But that's
Well, that's how it is, isn't it?
that's
That's
just how it
people
is.
are
That's how
sometimes.
human nature is. Yeah.
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 You know, they don't want it for you, but it's okay for them. So it's just one of those things where it's just very bizarre because you're presenting yourself in a certain way so that you can be liked and people will, you know, be influenced by you. But then when you go home and are supposed to be that same person that you're outside, you're a completely different person, and it's very confusing as a child. I would think that, you know, your dad is seen as this great person, everyone loves him, and then to get home and then see him in a different, you know, to act in a different way would be very confusing as a child.
Yeah. I think it was, and you know, I think I'm still I still have to forgive. I feel like I've kind of got to forgive a community in a way. If that makes sense, right? Even though there is actually nobody specific for me to blame, but I think all kids that aren't looked after, they don't just blame the parents. They actually go, well, where were you guys? Why didn't you do anything? And of course, that's a complicated. There's just no easy answer to that. There's 1,000,001 very understandable reasons why people didn't intervene.
Yeah,
but that's where that again another layer of distrust with people comes from, and that I have to keep an eye on.
That's
you know.
that's it. Yeah,
this is so cheerful, isn't it?
So now you've been through all that trauma and all that pain and all that learning. We call it all that learning, all that experience.
Yeah.
How do we then take it forward? How do we then obviously use it now? Not just protect us, but serves us so we can thrive in friendships. How do we do that? Yeah.
Another good question. How do we go? Right, what's my process? I don't know what my process is really. I think I just believe in having nurturing optimism or nurturing like just to be aware of, say, a jaded or depressive or pessimistic side, and to say, hi, it's okay that you're there. You've seen a lot of the world that you can't unsee and you can't unknow. But I think I also have to go out of my way now to make sure I see the good that's going on in the world, the good that people are offering me, the gifts that they are giving me, including being here today, the kindness that's all around. So I think it's consciously making sure I pay attention to that. And in terms of friendship, I mean, I think with loneliness and depression, I think a bit of advice that was given to me was to give more, to contribute more. And I felt, you know, my little ego got a little bit ruffled. I'm like, I give all the time. I do these things on social media. I give things for free. I offer things for free all the time. What do you mean? But actually what I was offering for free at that time, giving more of myself, it wasn't landing. People didn't want it. And so it made me go, okay, that didn't work. What else could I do? And then I realized I needed to do something that was scary for me, but exciting at the same time. And I don't know where this fits in with any theory around life, but by doing something that was scary and exciting, which was setting up that writers group, actually what happened was I'm definitely writing the solo show. I'm meeting amazing women. I'm in the heart of community. I'm healing all kinds of things as a result of that. And if that friend hadn't sent me a text saying, the only way I know how to heal that level of depression is to give more. And so even though I was offended, I'm like, I'm a really giving person. What else? Do you want me to chop off an arm and give it away? But so I had to be creative in that. And I had to actually be willing to take risk. And it's a combination of go out of my comfort zone, but not so far that it paralyzed me and made me feel like a crazy woman, but just enough level of excitement and nerves and just to do it. And now I have a new identity. I have I'm a creative person. I facilitate groups in this way. I have friends in Portobello and Ladbroke Grove. I go to I've been known to go to a party and dance for 4 hours with complete strangers. I never did that 6 months ago because I was sort of stuck in a little bit of a wounded identity. So in terms of making friends, I think everybody has to do that differently. And in terms of your wounds, we just have to keep healing that stuff and being kind with yourself, kind and compassionate, but brave as well. And they're not always exactly the same thing. Sometimes I can be really compassionate and things will stay the same. I can love myself in the darkest moments, but nothing changes. So sometimes you need to be super compassionate, and then you need to be the opposite. You need to go, get out there. Come on, be brave. Not everyone's like that. Come on. Because it's not true. Not everyone is like that, and we're all flawed. You know, so we all make mistakes, and we don't want to walk around feeling bitter and resentful about things from the past. We want to transmute that. We want to do something good with that. So my solo show is about transmuting that as well, taking that pain and going and sharing the sadness, but making people laugh as well, making it into something, making something beautiful out of it. So
well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this show now. When is it going to be available?
When it's finished, when I finish writing it. Thanks for the reminder, though.
Keep writing, girl. Keep writing.
To finish writing, but if I keep saying it to enough people, it will be finished. I'm on a there's a sense of momentum now because I've got this writers group. I go along and share, and they come along and share as well, and we help each other in that way. What did you guys think? Did you have an answer to your brilliant question? Another brilliant question from Stan.
I think we definitely agree with what you're saying in terms of using that pain, that suffering, that trauma, taking that energy and turning it into something positive where you can actually venture out of your comfort zone and try new things and not be so judgmental before you've even met the person, or be fearful when you've met someone new of how not to, let them into your heart. I find that I have that boundary where I don't let people in too much. We're friends, but we can't be besties, okay? Unless I've known you all my life.
Social distancing friends.
All your life.
But now I'm definitely looking at it from a different perspective where I feel like I look at how they treat me, how we have conversation, how we connect, and then take it from there instead of, just putting the boundary up and that's it, And I think continuing to work on that and continuing to talk to people, have connections with people, hopefully those walls will start to come down and, we will be more of a tranquil place. When we meet new people, won't be so fearful. And there may be a case of one day that you do something like that, but it's okay. We'll know what to do. We'll know what to look out for. We'll see those red flags, and then we'll just decide on how we're gonna handle that situation. So I think that's the best way to get through it in terms of once you've been hurt, how to navigate the wound, how to heal yourself, and then move on.
Yeah, and I think Kelechi, you're also saying about, and we were talking about red flags, actually being willing to see what the behavior is gives you some power. So if you see they're treating you well and they're respecting your boundaries and they're an encourager, then that's a great sign. So you can look at the evidence and not, but also I do think pay attention to the feeling as well, because sometimes you get a sixth sense, about people as well, as my experience anyway. As someone who's been single for a while and been on dating apps, sometimes I have to read things very quickly, actually, and sometimes I have to give chaps on a dating app a chance, and I do, and I'm like, no, I was right the first time round, I was right, but I needed to see the evidence. Sometimes I have to just wait for the evidence, and then I'm like, right, okay, that's no.
Going to wrap it up is we just want you to tell us what you're working on, how people can find you if they want to reach out for any coaching, any assistance.
Just let us know where they can find you. Predominantly, I'm going to be coaching women who are 50 plus, who define themselves as ADHD, whether they've had an official diagnosis or not, and they want to experience more ease and pleasure and magic and bring more of themselves to video so that they can reach their ideal client. So really, I'm working with women with online businesses who are ADHD and they don't want to fit into any kind of cookie cutter kind of a mold. They want to have fun on camera rather than do things in the way someone else has told them. So that at the moment is my coaching thing. It's helping with visibility on camera, and specifically women who are 50 plus with ADHD. And you can find me on movementintolife.co.uk or www.movementintolife.co.uk. And I also do movement work, which helps to balance the nervous system and help regulate your emotions. And so that really helps if you have scattered thinking, insomnia, stress, overwhelm, decision paralysis, any of those things. It just helps us to drop down into the body, because I operate a lot from here. So the things that I share with people are often things that I'm practicing for myself and that I know I need. So this particular movement practice helps you to be more congruent. So rather than it being you're thinking one thing, you're feeling another thing, and you're doing another, it helps you to sort of land more fully in your body. Yeah. So, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, that either. It's a kind of unusual technique, but it works for many. So
it's a niche.
That's what I offer. It is a niche.
Spiritual niche.
It is a niche. It is a niche. It's a niche, and there's a million and one different ways of tackling the same problem. So, some people do yoga, some people do boxing exercise, running. But this is one particular method to help people really manage their stress better. So
amazing.
It's great. We want to thank you for being our first guest, Leila.
Oh, you
so
two are
excited.
Amazing.
So excited to have had you come in and talk with us and chop it up with us about all things to do with adult friendship and how we can navigate this as grown-ups, and the treacherous waters that we tread in the trenches.
In the trenches.
In the trenches.
When we have issues with friends and family members and things like that. And we're really, really grateful that you took the time to come and talk with us today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome, guys. Make sure you hit Leila up. You'll see a link in the description where you can get to the website, all the information that you need, and you know what to do. Like,
subscribe, and comment.
We'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Live.